Okay, the pace of AI change is just, well, relentless. It's hitting everywhere, but maybe especially in creative fields, like software development.
Oh, absolutely. It's transforming how coding gets done. The tools are evolving so fast.
Right. And we're going to dig into a source you brought focusing on OpenAI's latest move here. The plan is simple. Cut through the noise, pull out the key stuff about this new tool, Codex. What is it? How does it work? And, why should you care?
Yeah, and the source material describes it in a really specific way.
Mm.
A multi-agent, cloud-based software engineering tool. That term multi-agent is doing a lot of work there.
It definitely signals something new. So let's start right there. What is this new codex exactly? The material calls it an agentic software development system.
Agentic, yeah. The idea is it's like having a team of virtual coworkers, but they're in the cloud ready to work.
And this isn't the first codex, right? This is an update.
Correct. It's an evolution of their older command line tool, the Codex
Oh.
CLI. A pretty significant evolution, it sounds like.
Okay, and how do people get their hands on it? Is it widely available?
Well, there's a preview in ChatGPT right now, but it's for pro, enterprise, and team users mostly.
For now.
For now, yeah. The source says Plus and Edu users should get it soon.
And is there an API option or something smaller?
There is. There's a model called Codex Mini Latest. It's designed more for that older Codex CLI setup, and you can access it via API.
Gotcha. Any idea on cost?
The material mentions it. It's 1.50 per million input tokens and $6 per million output tokens. So pretty standard API pricing tiers.
Okay, so a virtual team in the cloud. How does that actually work? When you give it a task, what's happening?
So the engine behind it is this model called Codex 1.
Codex one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the source describes it as a version of their top tier O3 reasoning model,
Okay.
but it's been heavily fine-tuned specifically for software engineering work.
Fine-tuned how? Just on code examples?
Not just examples. The source says it uses reinforcement learning trained on real-world coding tasks. So it's learning from success and failure, kind of like a human developer would, but much faster.
Interesting. And my role as the user, what does that look like?
You're basically the manager. You're in control of a team of software development agents. That's the framing.
And these agents, they actually touch my code.
They do. The material is clear. They operate directly on a user's code repository. So whether that's local files or, a GitHub repo.
Wow. Okay. And what are they doing in there?
The goal is to improve code, build features, or make pull requests. So pretty substantial tasks, potentially.
That sounds powerful, but also potentially risky, letting AI directly modify code.
Right, and they seem to have anticipated that concern. The source stresses the safety measures. Agents are kept in isolated sandbox containers.
Sandboxed, meaning?
Meaning they can't just browse the internet or access parts of your system they shouldn't. It's a contained environment. And importantly, the agents can't interact with each other.
Oh, okay. So no AI water cooler chat leading to rogue projects.
Yeah, exactly. You manage each agent directly. You prompt them to either write code or answer questions about the code. It's user to agent.
Got it. How long does a task take? Is it instant?
Not necessarily. The source notes it may take as long as 30 minutes, depending on how complex the request is.
And do you get any feedback?
Yeah.
Or just the final result?
You get evidence. After it finishes, Codex provides footnotes with things like terminal logs, test results,
Mm-hmm.
basically proof of what it did and how it went.
Transparency. Okay. That's good. Are there things it can't do yet? Limitations?
Yeah, a couple were mentioned. Doesn't take image input. So no feeding it UI mockups.
Right. You can't just show it a picture and say, build this.
Not yet, anyway.
Hmm.
And you also can't redirect an agent once it's started a task. You have to let it finish.
But maybe in the future?
The source hints that future versions might allow that kind of real-time steering. We'll see.
Okay, so if you can't redirect them mid-task and they can't talk to each other, how do you make sure they're all working effectively or following project standards?
Ah, that's where this AGENTS.md file comes in. It sounds really interesting.
AGENTS.md, like a read.md.
Kind of, yeah. The source describes it exactly like that, but for the agents. Its purpose is to modify agent behavior.
Modify how? What can you put in there?
You can set rules, like specify how and when an agent makes pull requests,
Okay.
or provide coding style guidelines, or list specific tests the agent must run to verify its own generated code.
So it's less about the specific task prompt and more about the overall process and rules they follow.
Exactly. It's like setting up the team's operating procedures, but for your AI agents. Pretty neat concept.
It really is. All right, so with all this structure, How well does it actually perform? Did OpenAI share test results?
They did. The material says that the Codex 1 model generally outperformed their other models, especially when they used those AGENTS.md files or gave it extra context like test logic.
So providing that guidance really
It
helped.
seems like it unlocks its potential, yeah.
What about specific numbers? Any benchmarks mentioned?
Yes. For general software tasks like generating patches, Codex 1 hit 75% accuracy.
How does that compare?
Better than their O3 model at high effort, which was 70%, and O4 Mini, which was 67%.
Okay, a noticeable improvement.
And then on tests specifically designed for this kind of agentic work, using a benchmark called SW Bench Verified.
Right, that tests real-world bug fixing.
Exactly. Codex 1 got 72.1% accuracy on its first try.
First try, wow.
Yeah, and that went up to 83.8%. It was allowed up to 8 attempts.
And how did O3 do on that?
O3 high effort was slightly lower on the first try, 69.7%, but pretty close on the 8-try mark at 83.6%.
So Codex 1 seems particularly strong out of the gate for these specific agent tasks.
That seems to be the takeaway, yeah. A slight edge, especially on that first attempt.
So let's connect the dots. Why is this specific development, this agentic codex, such a big deal right now?
Well, the source itself puts it plainly. Agentic coding tools have become a key battleground for AI providers. This is where the action is.
Everyone's trying to build the best AI coding assistant or team.
Pretty much. And these tools are already having an impact. They're making developers more efficient, speeding up development cycles.
The material mentioned vibe coding. What's that?
Yeah, it's this idea of a more fluid, iterative way of working with the AI, like a continuous back and forth, almost a flow state. It's less about asking for discrete snippets and more about collaborating on the flow of development.
Interesting. And OpenAI has been in this game for a while, haven't they? With the original codex.
Right. The source reminds us the first codex came out in 2021, focused on that natural language to code translation. It was actually deprecated last year, though.
But they just released an open source CLI recently.
They did, yeah, last month. The Codex CLI, a lightweight agent, so they're clearly committed to this agent direction.
And the competitive angle, the source mentioned a company called Windsurf.
Yeah, apparently OpenAI is in talks to potentially acquire them. Windsurf also does agent-based development stuff.
And the timing was interesting.
Very. Windsurf announced their own new coding models, literally the day before OpenAI announced this updated codex.
Wow. Okay, so the race is definitely on.
No kidding. But the core reason it matters, according to the source, is simple: productivity. AI assistance is delivering significant productivity gains.
And this agentic approach is the next level.
That's the idea. Moving beyond basic code completion to tools that handle more complex and varied development tasks with greater autonomy.
And managing multiple agents working together.
Is framed as the logical next step in scaling up that AI help.
Okay, so let's bring this back to you, our listener who shared this, thinking about your work, your interests.
Right.
What does this shift towards agentic systems actually mean day to day?
Well, the source had a really interesting observation about engineers and management.
Oh, yeah.
It pointed out that, many engineers resist going into management because they love writing code.
That's definitely a common thing. Moving up often means moving away from the keyboard, traditionally.
Right. But the source suggests these AI agents might change that equation. It actually says, with the rise of coding agents, we'll be able to keep coding even as we manage a virtual team.
Keep coding while managing. How?
The implication seems to be that managing this virtual team involves deeply technical work configuring the AGENTS.md, setting technical direction, reviewing complex AI-generated pull requests. You're still immersed in the code, just maybe at a different level.
So you're directing the AI execution, not just managing human schedules and tasks, like conducting an orchestra of code writing agents.
That's a great analogy, yeah. It could potentially allow technical experts to scale their influence without giving up the hands-on technical aspect they enjoy.
Blurring the lines between individual contributor and manager, almost.
It could, yeah. Redefining what both roles mean.
Okay, so quick recap. OpenAI's new codex is this agentic system, a virtual team you manage. They work directly on your code, handle complex tasks, guided by prompts and configuration files. Performance looks promising, especially with that guidance.
And it represents this broader industry shift towards more autonomous, capable AI coding partners, moving beyond just suggesting code snippets.
Which leads us to the final thought, sparked directly by the source. If engineers really can keep coding, even as we manage a virtual team of AI agents, what does that do to the traditional career path? Does the engineer to manager ladder even make sense in the same way? Or maybe, Does it change the very definition of what coding involves in the first place? Definitely something to chew on.